You're watching KSWT 13 on your side.
One local veteran is sharing his time during World War II after 70 years later. 13 on your side reporter Dallis has that story.
With every veteran you meet, there's a story to tell.
When I think about what some of the guys had to do, I'm so fortunate to have been able to be in the Army.
And for one local veteran in Yuma, he's sharing his story serving in World War II over 70 years later.
I think it's a time to really stop and think about these fellows that gave so much. I can't put myself in that category. I put in 3 years and was away from family, of course, but so many gave so much in the way of what they had to go through, what they had to see, and of course what happened to them. So many came back in much worse condition than they went, and so many didn't come back.
At 95 years old, Bill Wardle remembers his time of service like it was yesterday, where it began with his love of music at the age of 5.
In those days, Dallas, the Salvation Army used to march down the streets of Chicago with a drum and a couple of instruments and a bass drum, and go boom, 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 boom. Well, I was 5 years old and I had a toy drum and I did the same thing. And so right away my parents said, boy, he's got talent.
It wasn't until later in life, at the time of the draft, he gave up his instrument and traded it for firearm at boot camp.
I was 19 years old and 20 years old. I had earned my living playing music. And I just gotten a new job on the road, and I got a notice to report for induction. And they interview you, and you take a physical and all, and you either make it or you don't. Well, I made it, so that was the end of that job, because Uncle Sam said, I want you.
It wasn't long until his passion for music would come back and be his service in the Army Band, where he was stationed in Normandy, France.
I was totally overseas, 19 months. I went in the Army, I told you, in March in 1943, and I got out in March of 1946. I can't tell you, one of those things, I was very grateful and very happy I was able to serve. If you need something like that, if you have a function to perform and you're able to do it, you feel good about it, you know.
Whether it was performing at the officer dances,
it was great while we were doing it to be able to do that and to see people enjoy themselves when we'd have the big dances.
Or setting the tone for prisoners of war returning home. The Army Band was the sounds of war.
And it was our job to go out to the airport as these planes landed with these prisoners who had been such for that many years, and play some lively, welcome them, you know, make them feel happy like they were alive again. And that's something I'll never forget, because these guys had lived for 4 years, some even more, with one piece of bread and a bowl of potato soup a day. That was all they had to eat. And when they got off that plane, the joints were just as big as usual, but the arms were like that, and legs. It was just unbelievable to witness what they'd gone through.
After his time of service, Bill became part of a small traveling band playing the piano, where he later landed a position at a Chicago radio station as a radio personality.
But all the years, the 30 years that I worked at the radio station, I also worked nighttime in Chicago. Any piano player can get a job. You can work 3, 4, 5 nights a week. So I'd work on the radio station in the daytime, work a job at nighttime in Chicago. So music was, you know, not only my life, it was my living. And I enjoyed it.
It was Bill's love of music from a young age, which he said had stuck with him and saved his life during the harsh times of war.
To do what basically I did as a civilian, it's a rare thing. Not many were able to do that, and I think of the guys that were not that fortunate, that came back not quite as good a condition as they went over, and of course those that didn't come back at all. And I give thanks about that very often.
Ta-da!
For 13 on your side, Dallis Ontiveros.
Keep in mind, Bill is very active for being 95 years old, and when asked about his secret for good health, he said it's Frosted Flakes. And the last thing I'd like to share with you at home is a souvenir of his time of service. And this is a rock from Normandy Beach during the time of D-Day while he was out there in his service, and a time he said he will never forget. Once again, I want to thank him and his family for really giving me the time to share their story. Also, Rhonda at Desert Lakes, and you know what? You can rewatch it again later tonight on our website at kswt.com. Reporting in the studio, sending it back to you, Mark, with more.
What a great story, thank you. And Frosted Flakes, I better change my breakfast cereal.